Life after Bryce. That is what we will call this era of Washington Nationals baseball. And since the departure of the superstar to the rival Philadelphia Phillies, it hasn't exactly been smooth sailing in Washington, D.C. What's up, everybody? I'm Tara Wellman. Welcome back to another series preview as the St. Louis Cardinals head to the nation's capital to take on those struggling Nationals. Audrey Stark is joining me today with a unique perspective as someone who has followed and written about both the St. Louis Cardinals and the Washington Nationals, much like my podcast host, Alex Crisafulli. Very familiar with the dual perspectives of East Coast Cardinals fans. So Audrey's joining me today to look at this series between the soaring Cardinals and those struggling Nationals. Well, Audrey, thanks so much for joining me today. I'm excited to talk to you because it's interesting to me when I find people who are fans of multiple teams, and I love hearing the backstory to that. So first of all, thanks for joining me. But second of all, how are you a Nationals fan and a Cardinals fan simultaneously?
I'm a Cardinals fan by birth. I grew up in southwestern Missouri, so it's all Cardinals all the time. And I actually came to DC for college and stayed here, and so I've been out here for about 7 years before I moved back home, and it's kind of hard to hate the team that whose city you're in, and so they kind of grew on me. Even Bryce Harper kind of grew on me, and 2012 happened, and that was nice, and so I got to experience both the elation of that and also the collective sorrow of a city. So that was interesting, and. So that's kind of how I ended up being a fan of both teams. Cardinals are number one, obviously, but there's a special place in my heart for the Nats.
Yeah, you can't ever get away from it when it's in your blood like that.
Exactly.
I'm sure that was a bit of a recovery period for Nationals fans after 2012 and getting back to a play. I don't know if they're over it yet. I think Pete Kozma is still sort of you just don't talk about it.
Yeah. I do. Whenever the Cardinals are in town, I do wear my Cosmic jersey, and I still get some comments on it. So,
you and my dad might be two of the only people who have Cosma jerseys, so he would appreciate that.
Yay! For that reason only. I love Pete Kozma for this reason, and therefore I must continue to troll Nationals fans. So.
And I'm sure it works out very well, but let's leave that in the past. We won't dig in too deep at this point. Yeah. Let's talk about the series this week between the Cardinals and the Nationals. Cardinals are kind of firing on all cylinders right now. Well, maybe not. The starting pitching's a bit of a question. We'll get to that. But for the Nationals, it's been a bit of a struggle starting this season, obviously dealing with not having Bryce Harper after the saga of what that was over the offseason. So maybe let's start there. What is life like without Bryce Harper in Washington, D.C.?
It's really weird. I was actually in my cab on the way to the hotel, and we were driving by the ballpark, and they were like, "Oh, is the game starting soon?" We're like, "No, it's happening right now." He's like, "Oh, it's kind of empty for a weekend game." I was like, yeah, it's that post-Bryce fatigue. But it's just weird because he's been here for so long, and especially since I've been a fan, I became a fan probably 2013, 2014, and right as Bryce was really starting to come up on the national stage and right before the MVP season. So he did so much here in DC, and he was such a superstar and such a big name. It's weird not having him around. So there's this me personally, I feel a lot of loss, but there's a lot of bitterness here too, for sure.
Yeah, I wondered about that because it kind of felt like the writing was on the wall, right? That Bryce wasn't coming back to the Nationals, but there's still that little bit of Cardinals fans went through it with Albert Pujols, and when that star leaves, there's this sense of we weren't good enough for him or whatever the feeling is there, and that doesn't go away very quickly, as we all know. With Albert Pujols finally coming back to St. Louis, it sparked a lot of emotions for a lot of Cardinals fans, I think.
But the difference between Albert and Bryce, though, is that Albert went to a completely different league, right? Bryce went to a division rival, and it's not even it was the Braves. It's the Phillies. It's
the rival
betrayal. Yeah, so.
Yeah, a bit of a bitter pill to swallow, I'm sure. Especially, we saw it in that first series between them. I think that's going to be a challenge for a while. But outside of Bryce Harper, there are some shiny new toys. Let's talk a little bit about some of the young guys for this Nationals team. Victor Robles is a story. Of course, Carter Kieboom getting called up. And I don't know if everybody saw it, but there's a video out there. His first hit was a home run, and they also had the shot of his parents in the stands, like in the picture-in-picture in the corner. Amazing. If you haven't seen it, go watch it.
So cute. It's adorable.
So great. I am a sucker for Major League debuts, and that one was as perfect as they come.
Nailed it. Yeah.
Let's talk about it. With those two guys in particular, there's a ton of talent there. It's very raw. What can people expect from those two guys?
I mean, it's kind of a toss-up. You know, obviously the jump from AAA to the majors is, you really never know what you're going to get. And I think Victor Robles is a super talented defender. I'm not quite so sure whether or not that's going to show up in his offense quite as quickly, but I think he'll get there. Carter Kieboom, he's only been up here 3 games maybe, and he's already like cranking bombs and, you know, hitting in clutch situations. So like, I'm really excited to see where that goes.
Yeah, he that first home run tied the game, I believe. There was already a second home run. I mean, that's the kind of thing you like to see, but it also sets up some expectations for that happening every time, which may not be super realistic.
It may be a beginner's luck rookie situation. You know, it's where he's just getting lucky right now. But I mean, he's been one that we've been watching for a really long time. His brother's in the organization as well, Spencer. So that's been really fun. I think that of the two, I think they've got really high ceilings. So it's really just what they do with their opportunities right now.
I did ask for some questions on Twitter, and a couple of people threw some names out there, one of them being Victor Robles. And the question was, is it possible for him to factor into the Rookie of the Year standings this season? Because there are a lot of super talented guys, and I feel like this Rookie of the Year crop of players. But is he a guy that you think can make some noise there?
I definitely think so. He was my pick at the beginning of the season, but you know, Pete Alonso, and there are a bunch of other people factoring in. I'm not quite sure whether or not, because I think offense plays pretty heavily into that, and I don't know if he's going to hit well enough to make like a big enough impression. But he's certainly a contender in my eyes. But you know, I'm a little biased.
What do you think it is? I mean, obviously, offensively, that's a huge piece of the puzzle for him. But what is the next step as far as maybe getting that recognition, either for the defense that fans who watch the Nationals all the time know about, but maybe nationally isn't so well known?
I don't know. He's got a lot of competition in terms of like Juan Soto, because they're both outfielders and he established himself really well last year. So I think really he's kind of climbing out of that shadow, making himself known as like a center fielder who's, you know, like Billy Hamilton-esque out there almost, being very speedy, very good at reading balls off the bat. I think that's kind of, I mean, it's just going to be a lot of work, because there are still so many, not Bryce Harper big names, but there are some really talented people on this ball club that he's just going to have to, you know, not compete against, but, you know, make a name for himself outside of them.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I wanted to talk about, obviously there's some exciting new kids on the roster, but there are still some sort of tried and true veterans, Anthony Rendon being one of them. You mentioned Juan Soto, a guy who made a big splash last year. A lot of talent still. Sean Doolittle's around. I mean, there's so many names that feel like they've been around forever, and that's not even to talk about the Max Scherzers and Steven Strasburgs of this team. How are those guys kind of dealing with this sort of strange era of Nationals baseball right now?
I don't really know if they are dealing with it. It's been this really weird sort of transition. They're kind of playing 500 baseball throughout this first half. I think they're a little bit under 500 right now, but it's just been like, you know, their starting pitching is good when it's good, and when it's not, it's kind of hopeless, you know, because their team has this really bad habit so far of scoring a lot of runs, just not more than their opponent. So those 1-run losses, 2-run losses, they sting, and they just can't quite get there. I think that Sean Doolittle's doing his job. Dude's just doing his job. He's a solid part of a bullpen that is otherwise falling apart. And I think the biggest thing for me is Ryan Zimmerman. He's been a Nat forever, like literally forever, as long as the Nats have been the Nats. And this, I think, is the last year of his contract. So it's been really weird. He just landed on the injured list. Anthony Rendon has had like maybe 3-4 appearances in the past, I don't know, like week, because he's got, I think, an elbow injury or something. Something on him is sore, and so he hasn't been playing. And it's just like, okay, well, your guys are injured, and he's taking up a bench spot, and they haven't even put him on the IL yet. So I don't really know what's going on there. And I don't know. Max Scherzer's doing what he can. Steven Strasburg's doing what he can, but they need offense to pick him up, and that's not always there. So it's a constant struggle.
It makes it difficult when you get the pitching that you so desperately need and then still don't win. A couple of familiar faces on this team. Obviously, Trevor Rosenthal now on the IL as well. That's been a bit of a saga in and of itself. Matt Adams, a familiar face, again, back with the Nationals after a brief homecoming with the Cardinals last season. But there are some people that have a history, but between the Cardinals organization and the Nationals organization. I imagine that's kind of fun to get to continue their story.
Yes, I love watching Matt Adams. It's just, we've been watching him. He had so many moments in St. Louis that I can't let go of. I'm always going to root for him. And I think he's actually going to get some more playing time now because Zimmerman just landed on the IL, so he'll be the regular starting first baseman for at least 10 more days. So
he's always interesting to me because he'll struggle so much that you feel like it's done, it's over, and then all of a sudden he'll go on a tear, and you're like, oh, yes, that's why we keep trying this.
Yeah, and it's like he'll get clutch hits, and you're like, oh yeah. And so even when he's like struggling, you're like, well, would you put Matt Adams up here? Yeah, because he has a penchant for that sort of thing. So I still like him as a bench bag, even whenever he is going like 0 for 8 or something. And as for Trevor Rosenthal, that could be going better, a lot better. He's on the injured list right now, but I don't even think he's gotten like 3 outs yet. It's been a constant struggle. He just can't find the zone. I don't know if it's like a Rick Ankiel yips thing or if it's just like a recovery from Tommy John thing.
I was going to ask you that because no one likes to say that's what's happening because it's even harder to fix that than an injury, right? Because no one quite knows what the switch is going to be. It's so hard to watch though for him right now because everything that made him successful for a long stretch, and I know he caused a lot of heartburn, but he actually was quite successful as a closer for the St. Louis Cardinals. Despite all of that, all of that is gone right now, and it's. I was going to ask if it seems like it's as much whatever that mysterious mental thing is that sometimes just goes away as it is an actual injury.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's been, watching him has been painful because I want him to do so well and he just can't find the zone. And he never had the best control even when he was like peak Trevor Rosenthal. So you're like, oh dear, what's going to happen? No one knows. So I hope that he gets to make a couple of starts, maybe in the not starts, but appearances in the minors and then figures out whatever is wrong. I don't know if, I know a lot of guys when they have Tommy John surgery, they have a team that, they're guaranteed to come back to, and he had to search for a home because no one really wanted to take that risk. And now kind of we're seeing why. Yeah. But hopefully he can right the ship.
Yeah, I know there were a lot of Cardinals fans, myself included, who kind of hoped that if Rosenthal could return to what he was, he could play a very valuable part in a Cardinals bullpen. Turns out, smart move, not going that route. The Cardinals bullpen has been very strong. Trevor Rosenthal has not, but it's strange to watch that for sure. Let's stay with pitching for a minute because the starting pitching for the Nationals seems to always keep them in a series. When you've got Max Scherzer, you've got Steven Strasburg. In this series, we'll see Patrick Corbin, who was a big offseason addition. We'll see Anibal Sanchez. Then it'll be Max Scherzer and Strasburg to end the 4-game set. For the Cardinals, it'll be Michael Wacha coming back from missing his last start with a bit of a knee issue. Then we'll have Adam Wainwright coming off of a strong start, followed by Miles Michaelis, who should be their ace, but has had a little bit of trouble getting it going. And then in that 4th start, not super sure who the starter is going to be at this point on the Cardinals side of things. So when you look at what the starting pitching has done for the Nationals this year, when you look at the addition of Corbin, let's just start there. What does a guy like that do when you add him to Scherzer and Strasburg?
100%, in my opinion, the best move of their offseason. I love that. I think that they really needed a third person in the rotation because, two of your pitchers, they can't carry a team. That's what maximum 40% of your games, and they're not going to win all of them. So, you can't just rag on the backs of those two. And so now you've got a really good third starter, and that just kind of, with their bullpen success that they had, you're like, okay, their pitching's going to be like lights out. It's going to be amazing. But that's kind of been the thing. Patrick Corbin will do well. He'll get them to that 6th or 7th inning, and then it just kind of crumbles. And I think, but like I said, that was the best move, I think, of the offseason, was just really shoring up their rotation, being like, look, we have 3 weapons that you're always going to have to go up against, and it's always going to be a struggle for opposing hitters.
Yeah, that was, Corbin was a guy that a lot of teams had their eyes on, I think, and I felt like similarly, that's a really good get for the Nationals because of who they compare him with. Of course, throwing from the left side, he's got a slider that will prove difficult for the Cardinals hitters, as all left-handed sliders do. But I did notice, I mean, he's walked 6 on the season and struck out 39. It's a pretty decent ratio.
Absolutely. He's done so good, and I'm really happy to see that. Like, he's always keeping them in it, like you said, and they need pitchers who can do that, but their offense has got to pick them up. They got to score runs.
That second game of the series is intriguing to me with Sanchez and Wainwright, because it feels like of the 3, that's the least predictable as far as what we're going to see.
Sanchez is, I mean, of their 5 starters right now, the 3 you mentioned, and then I think Hellickson and Sanchez, he's probably definitely number 5. Like, he's not great, to put it lightly. And so for me, it's kind of like him, and then Adam Wainwright's been a constant question mark. Like, he's been on, and he's had really great games, and then he's had really big struggles this season so far, and you're like, which Waino's going to show up? I don't know. I know which one I hope for, but, it's a question mark. So that's going to be really fun. I'm excited to see how that ends up, whether or not Waino's curveball can really continue mystifying Nationals hitters, or whether Anibal Sanchez can finally get it together.
Yeah, I am curious, the most curious about that game. Then, as I mentioned, Max Scherzer against Miles Michaelis could be a really strong, awesome. Really strong pitching performance. What do you look forward to the most in a Max Scherzer start?
Dude, the strikeouts. He strikes out everybody, it seems like. I remember there was a game I went to where I think he was on pace at one point for like 22 strikeouts. It's like, it was great. And I mean, that's kind of what I remember about Max Scherzer. And he's always so intense. I just love watching him like stalk around the mound after a strikeout, just like talking to himself. He's like either pumping himself up or like, oh man, I made a real big mistake. I gotta fix it. And he's just so like into it. I love that. It reminds me almost kind of like Chris Carpenter level intensity. I really enjoy watching
Yeah,
that.
I was gonna say, I see a little bit of that, don't talk to him because he might bite your head off kind of intensity, which is, you love seeing that in a guy that's out there competing at his level. And I feel like sometimes the guys who are the best at what they do can sort of tap into that intensity in a way that other guys can't. On the flip side, I don't think Miles Michaelis does that. He kind of does the reverse. He's like the most chill sort of ace-ish pitcher that I think I can imagine, and he just sort of like casually goes out there and does his thing, and that's that.
Yeah, and he's another guy though. He doesn't really walk people. He's like, here's a ball in the zone. If you can hit it. Good luck. I love that.
And unfortunately for him, it's gotten hit a little more this year as far as home runs are concerned. That has been, I don't know that I would say I'm concerned about Miles Michaelis at this point, but it's been strange to see so many home runs launched off of a guy that really eliminated that threat pretty much entirely last season. Yeah, so we'll see how that matchup goes. And then, like I said, I don't know quite who the Cardinals are going to throw in that 4th game, but Steven Strasburg is always interesting to me because I feel like he's been there for so long, but as good as he is, he's the shadow to Max Scherzer, right? But what is it that he does as the shadow to Max Scherzer that is so important to this team?
I mean, he brings it every time. He's so good at pitching, obviously, but like he's actually starting to use his curveball more, and I think that's something that he's really learned to like. He's an adapter. He adapts to whatever he's got on any given start. He's really good at that. He sees what they're hitting, and he's like, okay, well, if they're hitting this, I don't have that tonight, so I'm going to use this. And I think he works really well. I think he's vibing pretty good with the new catchers on the Nationals roster. And so I think that's kind of the thing he has on Max Scherzer. Max Scherzer is a clear, like, this is what I have, and I'm going to throw it. And if you can hit it, well, I'll tip my cap kind of dude. But Strasburg is always going to be kind of more in that mental game where it's like, okay, I'm going to throw this and because that's what I've got this day.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I love when you see that and you can, because not many people can do that. I feel like there aren't a whole lot of guys who can be mental enough about what they're doing to think through it while they're doing it, as opposed to kind of just shutting their brain off and doing what they're trained to do. So that's interesting. I like seeing that. And Strasburg is a guy that I think, like I said, for me, I kind of always go, oh yeah, Steven Strasburg. But that's just sort of the nature of playing alongside someone who's as good as Max Scherzer is.
But he's definitely beloved here in DC for sure.
Oh, I'm sure he is. And it's, that's, I feel like I don't have a great beat on what East Coast baseball fans are constantly stirring up, as much as obviously I'm in the Midwest. I know the National League Central and their fans pretty well, but between Nationals fans and to some extent like Phillies fans and even Mets fans, it's always interesting to me to find that sort of the beat of a different fan base. You mentioned Rendon not playing the last couple of days. One of the other questions from Twitter was, is there a chance, do you feel like, the Nationals would be interested in bringing him back next year? He's a guy that I think a lot of people have talked about as one of those big free agent possibilities next season, where he's going to land, where he's going to how long the contract is going to be, all those things. Is there a chance that he stays in DC, do you think?
I think there might be. I mean, if the Nationals aren't interested, they sure should be, because personally, I think he's better than Nolan Arenado in a lot of ways. So, I mean, he's probably going to be like one of the best free agents on the market this year. So, I think that, personally, he should try free agency, and, given that who his agent is, I'm sure, hopefully he'll probably make that route. But the Nationals also really tend to backload their contracts. And I think that played a lot into Bryce Harper not signing here. So all that deferred money. And I don't think they'd be willing to, if they weren't willing to do that for Bryce, they're probably not going to be willing to do it for Anthony Rendon, to pay him up front and, on a year-by-year basis, what he's worth. So I don't really know. Like, that's a huge question mark. They've had some meetings and they've had discussions, air quotes, discussions. But I don't know where that's going to land. It's the Lerners do not have the best history whenever it comes to decision-making in these areas. So I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you feel like he's a bit underrated, because he's a guy that is in a lot of those conversations, but not always in the same breath as Nolan Arenado or Manny Machado or whomever else it might be.
He's somehow never been an all-star, but has played all-star baseball the last 2 seasons. Like, he's so underrated, and he's, weirdly enough, I think he's fine with that. Like, I think he's totally fine just going about his business, doing what he does. And I'm over here like, no, you're like the best. What are you even doing? This is like all-star Anthony Rendon, please.
Maybe this is the year. Maybe this is the chance he gets. I also wanted to ask real quick about the situation with the manager in DC, because I feel like, as you know, these things sort of explode very quickly with managerial drama between Mike Matheny and others in the National League Central in the last couple of years. Martinez feeling the heat a little bit, and it's still only April, but what is the drama right now, and what are people wanting him to do that he isn't doing right now?
I mean, I don't really like him as a manager. He's studied under the tutelage of Joe Madden, who, obviously being a Cardinals fan, is not one of my favorites. But he really, he kind of brought that whole, let's have fun and let's do things mentality. And I don't know, Dusty Baker got so screwed. I think he 90 plus win seasons both years that he was here. He got them to the postseason 2 years consecutively for the first time since they moved back to DC. And they just didn't think Dusty was enough or something. I don't know. He was good. He was exactly what they needed, in my opinion, and they dumped him for Davey. And last year he tried to prove himself and he just didn't. He couldn't match up. And so this year we're like, okay, round two isn't starting off that well. And to be fair, he does not have a lot of pieces to work with in the bullpen, and they're blowing it like hardcore. But at the same time, you do have to work within what you're giving. And is he utilizing the bullpen the way he should? Not always. And he showed he did not do that very well last year. And so he hasn't gotten any better at that, which you would have expected him to do. He's not, I don't know, he doesn't give me I don't want to say he doesn't give me leadership vibes, but he's just not, I don't know. I just really like Dusty Baker, and I thought that they were on an upward trajectory, and then it just kind of fell apart. And not that all Nats fans like Dusty Baker, a lot of them didn't. But, at the end of the day, he was able to utilize the bullpen effectively and all of the pieces. So it's just comparatively, Davey's not really matching up yet.
Yeah, it's always, it feels like it's always bullpens, right? If a manager's bad at something, it's always bullpen management. I think in many respects that just proves how difficult bullpen management is. But at the same time, it takes a really special person to be able to sort of pull the right strings and make those pieces work, especially if, you've got guys who just aren't performing. And there's an element to that as well, that, a manager can only do so much if guys aren't going out and executing what their job is. But that just adds so much pressure and so much tension, I think, to any season, especially when it starts out this early. We saw it with the Reds last year. We saw it with the Cardinals last year. There's this kind of dark cloud no matter what happens. So I'll be interested to see what happens there with Davey. Do you feel like there's any sense that he's actually on the hot seat? Like there's any danger of his job being taken, or is it just sort of the tension of the bad start?
I don't think so. I think, I could be wrong, but I think the Nationals have such managerial turnover so often, and they've never really had, or at least now since I've been a fan, a great one outside of Dusty, really. It's always been just, this cycle of 2 years and then they're gone. And I don't think they want to do that again. I think they really want to have some sort of stable presence at the top. And right now, I think what they may be simply considering this his learning curve. Last year there were some real stupid things. He made a pitching change before a pinch hitter had been announced. Just little things like that. And you're okay, he's not going to do that again. But just little things that he had to learn. And I think that the Lerner family is probably looking at it okay, we'll give him some more time to sort of acclimate.
Unfortunately, potentially for Nationals fans who have to watch that happen. All right, last question for you. As we look at the series with the Cardinals and the Nationals, if there was a key to the series for the Nationals to come out of it feeling okay, this was a success, what's the key to this series for Washington, D.C.?
I would say just get to the St. Louis Cardinals pitching. Because we have Waka, who's a question mark, Wanger, who's a question mark, NICOLAI, who's been iffy at times. If you can get to the starters, then like I said earlier, they're just not scoring enough runs. Well, this would be a series in which they can finally overcome that and really be okay, our offense is really going to take off right now.
Yeah, and that starting pitching has really been the key for the Cardinals in many respects. I would say offensively for the Cardinals, the key is going to continue to be Marcell Ozuna, because he's on a different level right now. He fell off the wall in left field and suddenly became a good baseball player again. I don't know what happened. No, but he's been something else, and it's been really fun to watch what he's doing. And you always kind of felt at least I did, that if this team was going to be what it was capable of offensively, it was kind of going to start and end with Marcell Ozuna doing what they brought him to St. Louis to do, and all of a sudden he's doing it. So offensively, that seems to be the turning point or the key for these St. Louis Cardinals. But it should be an interesting series with the way that pitching has gone for both teams, be it the starters or the relievers for the Nationals. So Audrey, thanks so much for your time. Where can people find stuff that you write and put into the world of the internet?
I am contributing to Fangraphs right now, and you can find me on Twitter at HeiStarkSunday.
All right. Everyone, make sure you give Audrey a follow, and we will talk again sometime. Thanks so much.
All right. Yes. Thank you.
The Cardinals head to D.C. after wrapping up a series with the Cincinnati Reds, and the Nationals conclude a series with the Padres prior to hosting the Cardinals this week. On paper, this looks like a series that will come down to pitching, which probably means it's going to be 12 to 7 every night. So buckle up, we'll see what happens because we can't really predict this game. But my thanks to Audrey for joining me to give it a shot. Make sure you follow her on Twitter and check out her work over at Fangraphs. Make sure you're following me because then we can continue this conversation. Subscribe to this channel for more game recaps, more series previews, among other things. And let me know in the comments below which starting pitcher you are most excited to see as far as the matchup between the Nationals and the Cardinals. I think that's all I've got. So I'll see you next time.